Yo, howdy again everyone, and this time I'm checking out another new autofocus Yongnuo lens that's generated a bit of interest, their YN 16mm f1.8 DA DSM. It's for Sony's E-mount mirrorless cameras, and it offers an APS-C image circle, so it's intended for crop sensor cameras. However, here's a full frame image that I took on my A7R III, and you can see that quite a lot of the sensor is actually being covered there. Anyway, 16mm on an APS-C camera is a really wide angle, adding a touch of drama to your images with corners that stretch around in a subtle way. Really useful for any kind of wide angle shooting. But this lens's party trick is that bright maximum aperture of f1.8. Lovely! It'll enable you to shoot more easily in darker situations, and perhaps more interestingly, give you clearly out of focus backgrounds, and I love getting background separation in my wide angle images. It leaves you with an image that really jumps out. The price of this lens should be about $300 when it comes out, although that's not confirmed yet. I'll mention it in the description below, but if it is in that ballpark, then it's potentially a good deal. I'd like to thank Yongnuo for sending me a copy of this lens for testing, although as usual this will be a totally independent review, and I'll be checking out both its strengths and its weaknesses. Let's start with the build quality. It's a pretty small, inconspicuous looking thing, smart and simple, and being mostly made of metal, it's also quite tough. It weighs 310 grams, so you'll know it's on your camera, but it won't weigh you down. Yongnuo advertised that the lens is weather resistant, and there is indeed a generous seal around the rear mount. You can also see here a USB-C port for future firmware updates, which is covered by a little rubber plug. Next comes auto manual focus controls and a focus hold button, and then a metallic focus ring, which turns extremely smoothly. Some good news for video makers here is that the lens displays very little focus breathing, just showing a little warping around the corners of the image as you focus in and out. I was impressed with the lens's autofocus motor. It works silently, quickly and accurately, being especially quick when you're shooting in autofocus continuous mode, as usual on a Sony camera. The lens comes with a plastic hood, which is nice and deep for such a wide angle, and fits onto the lens quite confidently. The lens's filter thread size is 58mm wide, and the lens does not feature image stabilization. Overall, considering this is a low-budget optic, it's built really well, feeling nice to handle and working perfectly. Let's take a look at image quality now. I'll be testing it on my APS-C camera, a little Sony a5100 with its 24-megapixel cropped sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. At f1.8, sharpness and contrast are excellent in the middle of the image. Let's take a look in the corners. Okay, there's a little smudginess there, but they're actually not bad, and contrast is certainly holding out well. Let's drop down to f2.8. Now we see much more sharpness emerging, although the image is still a little dark there. f4 looks a little brighter and clearer, although the eagle-eyed will spot just a touch of purple fringing emerging now on contrasting edges. Stop down to f5.6 and image quality is as good as it's going to get in the corners. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, although f16 starts to look softer due to the effects of diffraction. Overall though, the lens performs really quite well considering its price point. Nice. Let's turn off in-camera corrections and look at vignetting and distortion. The lens projects a little bulge of barrel distortion here, as you can see. The corners are fairly dark at f1.8, unsurprisingly. Stop down to f2.8 though, and they brighten up very quickly, so there haven't been any nasty surprises here. This lens has a little secret bonus feature. It can shoot as closely as 17cm to your subject, which is fantastic for getting right up close to whatever you're shooting. At the closest distance, image quality softens a bit at f1.8, but more noticeable is the very strong purple fringing on contrasting edges. Stop down just a tiny bit to f2 for a nice improvement, and at f2.8 we see stellar image quality re-emerging. Let's take a look at how the lens works against bright lights now. The flaring pattern here is quite gentle really, although around the edge of bright points of light we see a particularly strong glare if it's close enough to the middle of the image. And while we're working in the dark, let's take a look at Coma Levels. straight from f1.8, bright points of light in the corners of your image show virtually no smearing at all, which is excellent for shooting at night time. Stop down to f2.8 and anything that was there is totally gone. Let's zoom out now and look for sun stars. Stop down to f8 and they begin to clearly emerge. At f11 they look gorgeous, and at f16 they're just plain spectacular, some of the biggest I've seen. Now let's take a look at the quality of this lens's bokeh. No problems here. Those autofocus backgrounds look lovely and smooth in almost all situations, well, to me anyway. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. The lens has performed very well so far, but here's a minor fly in the ointment. Colour fringing on bokeh highlights is absolutely crazy at f1.8. At f2.8, the situation quickly clears up, and at f4, there's no problem at all. Overall, well, yes, the Yongnuo 16mm f1.8 might not be quite perfect, but for the price you're paying, it's pretty accomplished in both its build quality and image quality. There are very few flaws here to spoil the party, and on top of everything else, its wide angle and bright aperture means it'll be loads of fun to use even if its quality isn't perfect. This lens is just the ticket for me, and good value, and I think a lot of people are gonna buy it and love it, so I guess it has to come highly recommended. Sweet! I love seeing affordable lenses making their way to market, especially ones as fun as this one. I remember 10 years ago when I was still shooting on digital SLRs, I'd have given my right leg to have a 16mm f1.8 lens to play with. I hope you found this video helpful, and if so, check out my Patreon page below for all kinds of bonus content for supporters of this channel, and ciao for now.